Welcome to First of All, Emily. Hi.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining all the way from Utah.
Yeah.
How's your spring treating you so far?
It's good. Yesterday I actually went skiing. We still have tons of snow. It's great. But then down in the valley, it's nice and warm. So it's kind of perfect right now.
No.
It's like a record snow year. So it's a lot later than usual. Yeah.
I'm in LA and we're freaking out about all the rain.
Do you have flooding?
Oh yeah. We're not set up for that. So it's a little chaotic. So.
There's a lot of flooding here too. Yeah. So.
Yeah. Really glad to connect with you. I am just so excited to talk to you about you and your book. I'm still moved by it. I recently finished it. So full disclosure, I'm as honest as I can be. I've been working my way through this book because it takes me a long time to finish anything, shows, movies. I piecemeal things. But I want to say with your book, I was genuinely just it's so fitting right now that I finished it in May because we're at Asian Heritage Month.
Yeah.
That's when we're recording this. And I actually just got back from the White House today and got to kind of be really immersed in being proud of our roots and where we come from. And not just that, but the politics of that too, right? The layered of the experience, but also the world that we've been living in and the truth of that. So I'm just so thrilled that you're here to talk about your book and share your journey, because this is a really meaningful story on top of the fact that it's beautifully written. And I love me some great writing. I love books. It's so meaningful right now. So I just want to start off with that.
Well, thank you. That's so kind of you. Thanks for taking the time to read it. It's like a friend letting you ramble at them for 2 hours about something you care about, So thanks for reading it. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. No, it's like poetry. Can you, I would love to just talk about the book and just work our way through how you created it. What is your elevator pitch when you explain this beautiful piece of art that you created?
I am the worst at elevator pitches.
I'm sure you're not as bad as you think, because everybody says that and then they speak and it's super eloquent, and I'm sure you're fine.
I think it's pitched as something like a 16-year-old Japanese American's photographer using her passion for photography to document the things happening to her during the time between Pearl Harbor and when they get sent to incarceration sites. So that's, I think, the kind of official elevator pitch.
Yeah.
It's still so uncomfortable.
No, you're good. This can all be practiced. This is a safe space. And everybody just gets to do their spiel. Where did the genesis of it come from? I love origin stories. I love to get to see the art, experience the art, but I'm really, really sometimes way more fascinated about the creation process of it. So
because you're an artist too, right? And are you a writer too?
I'm a fledgling writer. That's the weird thing. I didn't call myself that for years upon years, but I've been writing since I was a kid.
Yeah.
But then, I'm taking it more seriously recently.
Yeah, it's so hard to I don't know, just own those labels. I don't know. No one feels that way about saying they're a runner. You're if you run, you run, but it's hard with the creative side. It's that whole imposter syndrome, I think.
Oh, which is a very common theme here. And I'm happy to we can talk our way through anything. I'm here for you. I just want to know. Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know that I set out to write a book initially. I think I just was, I think this is pretty common to all Japanese American families. I'm sure there are some that aren't like this, but for most Japanese American families with family who were incarcerated, most of those families, there was kind of a silence around the topic for decades. It's almost a universal. And then at some point, I remember finding out that my grandparents, I think it was their 50th anniversary, they were talking about how they met in what they called at the time camp. And they talked about how all they could do for dates was to walk around the barbed wire, inside the barbed wire, over and over again. And my grandma would just laugh and be like, "Oh, your grandpa is such a fast walker," and she'd laugh about these things. She'd laugh about she'd tell us the funny stories.
Yeah.
But I think I was in 3rd grade or something when she told me that story. And I remember sitting there and just listening and being like, my grandma lived in a prison camp, and like not knowing how to process that.
Mm-hmm.
And then, you know, as I got older, I started asking questions and I asked them if I could do an interview just because I wanted to, I think it was like a school project or something, wanted to know that story.
Yeah.
And so I think initially it just started with wanting to know the story of like, of our family, but also, you know, as a kid, I grew up in Provo, Utah, which I think at the time I lived there was 90% white. And I knew I looked different than the kids around me, and wondered, you know, I had this sense that there was something had happened that was like a major shift in our family story. And I wanted to know about that, both wanting to know my grandparents' story, but also wanting to know my own, you know, where I came from. And so I think that's where it started. And then I think maybe things happened and I had things to say. This is like much, much later. And instead of getting on Facebook and, you know, writing about it there, I would go to my little notebook and work on this little story that I didn't know if anyone would ever see. But I think that's kind of when it started to become an actual novel.
Wow.
Was so, much, much, much later.
How long ago was that from now? Like when you actually began?
When I started? Yeah. Oh, you know, long time. Like I'm talking at least a decade ago. And I started a novel. I went and did my MFA in writing. And then when I graduated, I had a baby, like almost immediately after I graduated, and had 4 kids. And I just kind of put it to the side. I never stopped writing. Like I always kept writing, but not maybe towards finishing a novel, not towards publication. I wasn't in that space. I think so much of my energy was in this new phase. And so I was writing a lot of things that were for me and for my family, and maybe not so much for the outside world. But then I came back to it after my last was born. I came back to it, finished it, and held on to it for quite a while, even after I finished it. And then finally was like, okay, maybe I do want to see if I can do something with this and send it out to agents and stuff.
That's amazing. So, I love that. And I really respect your respect of the process. I sometimes I get a little eye rolly when we use these terms, which depending on who's saying it and what context, you know, it's totally a great term, the process. But sometimes it gets a little, you know, like it's the process, but it's real. Like having a way to express yourself and what the intentions are behind it, and then how it's done. It varies so much from person to person, right? There are people who set out, I'm going to write the next great American novel. And that's an amazing intention. And who knows what the result of that is. And then some people just want to write because they're really commemorating something incredibly hard and beautiful and tragic and important for just the commemoration's sake. And like, that's very personal. And so they can all kind of result in that. Those are many different processes resulting in a novel, but I just respect that you were very, what's the word? Like, there's so much integrity in your process. You were not pushing it like, okay, this is going to, you know, and I don't know. It's just part of our generation of everything is kind of created to be commercialized too. Oh yeah. In my opinion. And I just really admire and respect that. Like you're writing this just for you and for your family. And like, to me, I'll say like, I'll keep hyping your book up because it reads that way. It's not a boisterous, like, let me, you know, tell you that. No, it's like, this is just an honoring of it. I don't know how else like that.
Well, thank you. I recognize that it's a place of privilege to be able to take the time to work on something without financial, you know, support from that, you know, like it's like it was a time when no one but me cared if I ever finished this book, you know, no one knew about it. No one, there was no pressure in that way. But also, you know, there are a lot of people who, you know, their livelihood depends on if they, right now, especially we're talking about this a lot right now, right? Their livelihood depends on getting paid for what they write. And so it's a different kind of process when that's on the line. And
absolutely.
It's so hard.
I can't respect that. We're actually, so the timing of this, because we publish episodes at different times. Right now we're in the middle of the WGA strike, which I really back. I've dipped my toes into the writer's universe. My first short film's coming out this week. And it's very surreal. Like, I don't think it's fully registered. It's just like a fun project I did with my friends. It's not like a film. That's how I think.
I want to know more.
We can talk for sure. And in doing that, like, I've just fully immersed myself every week. I'm like around writers. We have a group called Deadline Junkies. Shout out to the DJs Monday nights. But we, like, every week, 2 writers put up 30 pages that they're working on. And that could be a TV show, a film, a play, like whatever they're working. They get actors to read it out loud so that they can hear it. We can give feedback. It's a very
that's
arduous
awesome.
process. And it's very through that, I've really just begun to learn and truly further respect the writing process. Oh my gosh, it is so, you can't force that. Like, how do you force inspiration? How do you objectify truth? And how do you?
Yeah, it is there is so much that's not in your control.
Yeah.
And I mean, I think what's in your control is continuing to put work out, and then, the more work you put out though, the more you're primed sort of, primed to put something good out, but then you also have enough out there that you can maybe trash the stuff that you don't want anyone to ever see.
Oh yeah, that's totally true. It's just build a body of work so that it just gets lost in the ocean.
So it's just, you just say, okay, that's terrible, don't publish that one. But anyway.
Yeah. I love that body work. Okay, so then, but you got your MFA in writing then. So you're working on this personal project in your free time, not knowing what the outcome's going to be.
Well, during my MFA, I actually did work on this project.
Oh, okay.
And that was the one period of time where I had deadlines and I had to produce. But by the time I finished my MFA, I probably had 100 pages or something. It wasn't a full novel at all.
Got it.
And of that, only some of it survived. When I came back to it, I probably took a break of 5 years or something before I came back. And by the time I came back, I had different things I cared about.
Uh-huh.
And, sometimes I'm I can see where different parts of this came from, a different part of my life.
Yeah.
But yeah, so yeah, it changed quite a bit. I don't think she was even a photographer when I was working on my MFA, which is kind of a major part of the plot. So
yeah, that is it. I was going to, that's the inciting incident and the objective of the protagonist. It has a lot to do with her photography. That's wild. What do you do with your, just curious, what do you do with all the bits that you end up on the cutting room floor? Do you save all of it?
Yeah. So far, I'm such a hoarder. So far, I have I have file boxes. There's a little part of me that's now that it's published, I saved that because I was I might need that. I might need to go back to it or whatever. And this is when I was still printing everything out. I'm actually still really old school that way. I write everything by hand first before I ever even type it up.
Amazing. That's so amazing.
Well, it's just, everyone has their way. But now I'm maybe I should throw that away. I don't really ever want anyone to read that, but I haven't yet, mostly because I'm just not that good at going through my stuff. But yeah.
Well, this is spring, and so we're in this whole streak of spring cleaning,
time.
at least in this household, and there's a lot changing, so I've been throwing things out left and right, things that I thought I would never throw away. And it kind of, you just arrive when you arrive, and you're like, okay, I'm actually ready to let this go.
Time. Yeah.
Who knew?
Yeah, no. Yeah, we've been going through my mom's house, and my dad's passed away, and through his things, and it takes time. It just takes time to be ready to move on and put some of those things away that you hold on to for sentimental reasons.
Absolutely. Much even the creation of the book. I think it applies both. There's a time for it to be let go, and it takes time for something to gestate and be birthed. And that's actually something that I'm very big into, kind of the laws of the universe and things arriving when you're ready. And I've been blown away by how many things I keep getting reminded about how impatient I am. And that's why I think I go back to that term when we're saying the process, like trust the process. I have struggled in the past really hard with that, to just say, oh, it's not ready right now. It doesn't mean it's not going to be ready. You just got to like believe I'm onto something. I'm just going to keep tinkering with it and putting my energy and time. And eventually I trust it will be something. And if it's something that the whole world gets to experience, great. If it doesn't, it's not, but like trust the process. And
the process is kind of the point. In a certain way, like obviously that is, again, you know, if there's a privilege to being able to even say that, but like, it is, I think it is important for all of us to just, I think everyone needs a creative something in their life. I think it's part of being human, you know, but yeah.
How would you describe yourself as an artist then? Like now that I would love that I go very deep and metaphorical, and everyone who listens to the show knows this. So I get like that even with real estate. But when you like, as a writer, I just feel like for me, the writers that I've met, I'm just, first of all, I love the same, first of all, like 30 minutes in, writers are some of my favoriteest people. That's not even a grammatically correct. I don't care. Some of my favorite people on the planet, because I've been around a lot of different types of creatives, a lot of actors, a lot of singers, songwriters, dancers, and I have so much love for all creatives. Writers, though, a lot of them can be highly introverted, but their minds are just like treasure troves of imagination and wit and humor. And like, you just can't tell, because it's a lot, not all, not exclusively, but a lot of writers are very introverted. They don't, it doesn't shine until like you see it on the paper. You're like, what is this? So yeah, I've been blown away. And I'm curious, like, how do you describe yourself as the artist, or like, how do you honor that, or how would you explain that? What made you do the MFA? Like, that's so
I've
cool.
never even asked. I've never thought about this at all.
That's why I'm here.
It's good. It's self-discovery. The MFA. Well, that's such an interesting thing, because, like, you know, I grew up in a home where I don't know. Well, my dad actually, he's Japanese. I don't know if I've said that already. He's Japanese, and he like suggested, you know, I bet you would love writing for children, when I was like a kid, like long time ago, like maybe 8 years old or something. And then I loved reading, and I loved, you know, writing, creating, drawing, everything. I loved all. I'm very much that side of the brain. But then I don't know, somewhere along the line, I got this idea that only certain people were like ordained to be writers or creatives. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Did you come across that too?
Totally.
And so I remember I wanted so badly. There was a creative writing teacher at my high school, and everyone said her class was so great. And I wanted to take her class every semester, and I never did, because I just thought that wasn't like for me. I don't know. It's really sad now. I'm like, oh, that's so sad.
That breaks my heart. Yeah. Really, like, you should have been there.
But, and so I think like there was just some part of me that always wanted to do it. I think I was a reader and I wanted to write. But anyway, I think I had already like, I got accepted to law school. I was on my last semester of college, and I was like, it's my last semester. I'm going to take this creative writing class. And I, took it. I was terrible. And I loved it. You know, and I was aware I was terrible. I could see that I was like trying to copy all these other people, and I was
subjective.
Just terrible. But anyway, there was like some part of me that was like, I love this, but I still didn't like think, oh, I'm going to go into this. I'm going to pursue this. I think, you know, I went to like one day of law school, and I was like, this is not where I'm supposed to be. I just know I'm not supposed to be here. So like I went back, I became an English teacher. And during those classes I was taking, during the time I was like doing my training to be an English teacher, I took these creative writing classes, and I was like, you know, it's kind of in the same field. And I just really loved it. And it was kind of an indulgence when I decided to do my MFA. I was like, I'm going to go do this thing I really want to do. You know, like
I'm cheering for that decision.
And it was wonderful. It was a great program. And I worked with authors that, my professor authors that anyway, I'm really, really grateful for that experience. So
that's so cool. And good on you. I have so much, the thing that I think I like crave to know about people's, especially the origin stories and like how they came to be, with those inflection points of like where, I mean, this is dramatic. This is like, I'm into film and the story, right?
Yeah.
It's like where all hope seems lost, or like, where's the turning point of like, okay, I can't do this. I'm all the self-limiting beliefs, or like whether it's internal, external, or a mix of both usually is. Yeah. It's like, I can't. And like, yes, you can. And then you're like, I will. Yeah. And then you go.
That's what we read for, what we watch films for. Yeah. I find myself, even like when I'm listening to like, I grew up playing the violin, and when I go to concerts, I'm like, I want a story. I want there to be a story in this, like, I don't know, like I don't know. Story is what makes some people tick. So.
Absolutely. Can I know like some of your favorite books, or like what were books that set you off when you're either young or older? I don't know. Not
so
that neither of us
let's
are
see.
Older.
Well, thank you. Let's see. Something I really love. I grew up with, my mom was like kind of strict. Okay. She wasn't kind of strict. She was very strict, and a lovely person too. She had this rule for me that like I was really into the Babysitters Club and Sweet Valley Twins. Yes! Do you remember them? Oh my gosh.
Everyone I read. Yes. Everyone.
And she was like, for every one that I read of those, I had to read 3 books off a list that she made of like classics, like Newbery Honors, books that she just considered important. And I would say now I look back at those books and they're like books that have stayed with me like forever, I really love Catherine Patterson.
Okay.
So that's Bridge to Terabithia, those kind of books. Yeah. Lois Lowry, really loved her. Something I read more really recently was, do you know Linda Sue Park?
I don't. Wait, why does that sound familiar?
She's kind of a Korean author, kind of famous in the children's book world.
Okay.
And she recently wrote a book called, I think it's been a couple years now, called Prairie Lotus, but it was so interesting because it's the story of a Korean Chinese character. People think she's half Chinese, but she's ethnically Korean. Anyway, it's a story that's but it's like in the time of like Little House on the Prairie, and it's this book that kind of fills in this gap of like no one's like seen that on TV yet.
Yeah, Prairie Lotus.
It's really good. Anyway,
evocative.
Yeah. So I don't know, those kind of books. I really like historical fiction. Ruta Sepetys, Sharon Cameron, those kind of books.
I feel like I need to ask you if you'll be so kind to make like a list of authors that I should, because
sure,
there's some parts of me that I believed that were, I'll share an insecure. I never thought I would share this, but like, here we are because I'm talking to an author, and so of course it's coming out. I think I had less interest in books that were categorically, like these are highbrow fiction, even at a young age, right? Mm-hmm. So say, for example, I was really into Babysitter's Club. I'm sorry, if I have children, I will love for them to. It introduced me to entrepreneurship. It taught me about female friendships. It taught me about. So good. And it gave the narrative from every single one of them, this ensemble cast, if you will, like from all of their different points of view, all of their different family lives, all of their different health issues. I still remember that Stacey has diabetes, and that's how I learned about type 1 diabetes, that she has to do insulin shots. I learned that
for me, it was the first time I saw an Asian character who was yes, it was really important for me at that time. Yeah.
Which is everything in her, tough relationship with Janine, with her. I remember all of it. Obsession with Candy.
They're real to this. Yeah. They're like,
and because that was my thing, and Beverly Cleary was a big favorite of mine. And still to this day, I think Roald Dahl is one of the best authors on the planet.
He has such a unique voice. It's just, it's pitch perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. So stuff like that, I think, there's books like The Giver and these really beautiful kind of revered and respected novels that were not necessarily my first grab. And it's not the thing that I got particularly excited about. Is the thing that you're assigned, and it's not, when you read it, you're like, oh wow, this is really a powerful novel, but it wasn't my go-to. Yeah. I think I kind of
Well, look
deep
at the
down.
cover of The Giver. It's
I
like an old
know.
man.
I know.
That was hard. Yeah. But I love The Giver. But it was, marketing wise, I'm like, they wouldn't do that today, I don't think. I
Exactly. It'll be really different. I mean, look at the art. The artwork now is insane. And that's something that I think is great for readers now. There's such a different way to absorb a book or be drawn to it, including the artwork. But I think that just made me feel like I'm in a different category of readers, or like the kinds of stuff that I'm into. And I didn't think
you
that
felt
I was
that
stupid.
as a child, even you felt like
because
you
like the stuff even in Scholastic News. Did you have that at school where you get like
Yeah.
order? I was so excited to order it, and I was excited to order my Babysitter's Club, which I did. I bought that stuff in addition to borrowing from the library. But I think I had a certain identity thing with like, I'm not a book nerd, but I am, because I read a lot. But I think the kinds of books that I was drawn to, the kinds of stories that excited me, didn't make me feel like super intellectual, I guess. And like I could tell that there were like these like highbrow, more type books that were not my jam at the time.
And I think that's what my mom was worried about. Was like she really had this hierarchy in her mind. I think that's changing. I don't know. I feel like I really think that it's important for kids to read books that they want to read, and to maybe decenter that idea of what is worthy of study. Like, why isn't something like this, worthy of, I don't know. I feel like that is changing though. And there's a shift in how we look at, especially children's books. I don't think people maybe analyze it the same way with adult books, but I think with children's books, we are looking a lot more at like, well, you can read something humorous and it can be totally, it can be worth literary study and be humorous at the same time. But I don't know. I think that's the point of having lots of different books, is there's someone out there who needs that kind of book. And when we start banning some books, that leaves certain kids out, and
Totally.
Not that they would ban the Babysitter's Club. Well, I bet
Who
someone
knows?
has. I bet someone has. I bet it's happened. But
there's a committee out there, somebody who has a very big vendetta against women empowerment. I don't know. God forbid that there's, and I was curious when that would come up, because it's a burning question. It's something that I've been studying from the University of TikTok.
I like that.
Where I get all of my most reliable information. Oh dear. But there's some good stuff. I defend TikTok a lot to people because I love my algorithm. Like I get to learn a lot.
Well, and it reaches people who wouldn't be like reading a New York Times article about it or something sometimes,
And I think exactly what you said.
Not saying that you wouldn't.
Oh yeah. No, and I do read the New York Times, but there's times where this is I think the interesting, I don't want to call it a conundrum. I just feel like this is where we're at as a society. We get information from a lot of different sources in a lot of different formats. And sometimes and this may be a problem, but I don't have the time or energy to sit through a really dense, lengthy 5-page article, though that would benefit me. I'm not denying that. If it could be distilled down to a 2-minute video that I can, but then it's bad if that's all that I watch. But do you know what I mean?
No, but I think that's it's a really, it has so much power to reach so many people. And I know today even, I saw this little video on Instagram about the writer's strike. And I was like, I want to know more about this thing. And so I went and I read a whole article about it. So it's an introduction, and then you can decide which things you want to go research more. And everything's available now. There's so much information available now.
Right.
So, I don't know.
Then people are trying to categorically say oh, that's bad information. I mean, if it's false information, disinformation, misinformation is awful. That is something that is the new challenge of our, from now on, I think, really. And it's also, in addition to that, but coexisting with that is that we have this wealth of information. It does allow more curiosity to things that I just didn't know that I didn't know this. And so now that I know, oh my gosh, I can go look into it. I can go read this book. I love book talk. And so book talk is what brought me to understand that there's all these bans going on. Also converging with the fact that I am interested in politics, for better or worse. It gives me migraines all the time, but it's
all of us. Yeah.
all of it, right? It's culture merging with politics in what happens in our daily lives. So like, yeah, I was really curious when we would talk about the banning of the books, especially because you've written this wonderful book that is geared towards young people. And that's really what's being, I don't know what the word is, but I feel like they're just, it's partial. There's so many things in politics that make me so angry that they're marketing it as like, oh, it's about the children when it's not. You know what I mean? It's like, it's a different agenda.
It's a culture war.
Exactly. Yeah. And that makes me really like, I start just, my brain hurts because I was like, if you're going to be about the kids, then be about it. Don't use that, especially that's such a low blow to like say it's about the kids, especially when it comes to like guns and all these things. And it's not about that at all. We're not stupid. We can see it. But anyway, thank you for coming to my rant.
I'm with you.
Yeah. So I'm curious, like what your thoughts are on that whole
on censoring, on banning.
On the censoring and the banning. I mean, I'm already getting so bad.
It is. I mean, it's absolutely like at the forefront, I think, of everything going on in publishing. I mean, so far, I think publishers are still publishing the books they want to publish. Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, and I'm sure you've heard about Maggie Tokuda Hall.
I have not.
Have you not? Oh, okay. So there was a book that was going to be included in I think it's a collection of AAPI voices for Scholastic, for like their educational division.
Wow.
And there's a picture book called Love in the Library. And in it, she had this author's note where she talks about how the things that happened back then happen now. Racism exists still. And she uses the word racism. She's pretty pointed. Mm-hmm. And for this collection, they wanted to censor some of that. Mm-hmm. And so it kind of blew up in the publishing world. She wrote a blog post about it. She decided not to take the offer to have her book included, it's a big deal to have your book included in a collection like that, you know?
Yeah.
And so, anyway, it kind of, blew up this conversation about are publishers going to start censoring in the same way that, to accommodate the feelings of these people who are threatened by these things that, like racism is real, but
yeah.
If people are uncomfortable with that, if that makes it so that you can't sell this collection in Florida, do publishers start to, and that's the big question. Do publishers start to, in the words of one author, carry water for the book banners? And so those things are happening right now. They're very, very, very much on everyone's minds.
Yeah.
And, I'll be honest, when I decided to publish this book, I was a little bit scared. I mean, it was for me speaking to things that maybe I wouldn't just say to someone on the street, and in fact would be afraid of some people's reactions. And now that it's published and I've had conversations with people, there are people who have said the very things I was like sort of dreading people saying.
Oh, okay. To your face, mostly, or like in what?
Mostly to my face, actually. Yeah.
Wow.
I just, like, I'm sure there are worse things I'm afraid of too than the things that have been said to me. But I've had people, I'll go do a book talk at a school, and some kid will come up after and be like, "Well, they had to put them in these prison camps. Otherwise they would have, and that comes from a place of fear and maybe what he's hearing at home and stuff."
For sure.
But you realize, you can only do what you can do. You can put this out there, and then some people will respond, and some people, it's hard to get through to some people. They've already decided where they stand on certain things. And I don't think that's true of this little, he's a teenager, but this boy, I think he's still open to lots of conversations. But yeah, I've had certain people say things like, I don't want to get into this too much. It's such a dark topic, but
I'm fine with it. You don't have this, again, safe space. So if you don't want to, I'm not pushing.
It's just, I've had people who their reaction has been, something like, well, it's important to remember that they were justified in doing this. I've had people say that to me, and that's the conversation I didn't really want to have. I didn't really want to put my family's story out on the line and then have to hear those things. But I've done it now. It's happened now.
Yeah.
And I've learned that it's, I can bear it and move forward and have that conversation if I have to. So
look at you.
No.
I am on so many different levels, Emily. Like everything that I care to write about. I mean, just besides besides me, the fact that somebody is facing a fear like that and dealing, because people can talk theoretically to no end about all the things. Most people will not ever experience the things that they theorize about. You had a theoretical fear, you faced it, and you felt with the literal fear because it faced you in the face and said it to your... Not that many people confront that for a lot of different reasons. And so hats off to you. I truly respect
thank you.
And
didn't mean to go so dark.
No, it's... Emily, I invite the truth. And like, this is why I wanted to have... And I'll tell you, even with... this show, this podcast, I've flinched on so many different topics. There's still stuff I haven't even talked about.
You put yourself and you do it all like right away. Like it's all immediate. Like I type my stuff up and then I think about whether I want to put it out in the world and I revise it. And then it must be so much more immediate to just have it and record it and put it out.
Well, one might call you more wise than I am.
No. I was brave.
That's
brave.
my family's issue is like, oh God, she's gonna like. So that's the story of my life. Is like she responds or reacts, whichever word you want to use. Yeah, better or worse. It's taught me a lot.
That's brave.
And then cool. in the writing too, which I think there's ways that we all kind of try to stay small, and it's a lot for safety and protection. It's not for. I mean, it's layered with different things like shame and like. Many, 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 many things. I think the fear part comes from a very genuine, true, like inarguable place of protection. Like I don't want to be putting myself in harm's way. And you are not naive. Like there is harm to be faced, right? And there is a risk involved. And I'm saying this is where like I get very heated sometimes. Like I'm exhausted from all of the ways that I've had to protect myself as a woman. And I'm not saying 100%. That men don't experience danger. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the type of exhaustion is a very mental, emotional, and physical. All the many, many things that I've had to maneuver through this life to keep myself safe. Why go that extra step to like say the truth about that I know about a lot of things, but that will further invite potentially and, invite scrutiny, criticism, someone coming to your face and like verbally, how I want to use this word, but like attacking you, internet trolls, like whatever. Right. And why would I do that? Like what same person? And then there's the other part of it, which is like, well, what's at stake if you don't say what you need to say, right? And then what's lost because you're not going to take that risk. And those are hard things. So
it's lost for the world, but also what part of yourself are you losing? Like
exactly.
I think a lot of women we accommodate it to the point where, and men too, but we accommodate to the point where we aren't who we really are. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say? And I feel like that's also part of sometimes my Asian side too. Like I feel that pressure. I don't know, from the culture, from like the maybe kind of patriarchal culture, and and you lose who you really are. So.
It's hard then. How do you even know who you really are? If Michelle Obama put something up on TikTok, she didn't put it up on TikTok. Someone put it up of Michelle Obama on TikTok, but she was saying life is about practice, and whatever it is that you're practicing is what you are. Like if you're practicing complaining all the time, you're a complainer. Like that's what you practice all the time. And if you practice being positive or being healthy, like life is practice, right? So if you're practicing masking and if you're practicing accommodating with the cost of that being yourself, and like that's where I'm actually learning a lot of ways that I have been betraying myself for the sake of X, Y, or Z. At the time, again, being young and not knowing better, I really thought it was for the best. And then, but like also looking at the result now, I'm also a very cautious, sometimes overly cautious and overly resentful person, because I'm just sick of accommodating everybody.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And there's a fear of going back to that, like if you've already experienced it. I think, when I said that a lot of Japanese Americans were silent about what happened for years, I think it was almost like a whole group that went through this thing where they, I think it was for a lot of different reasons. I think it was partly so they didn't like shift that burden to their children. I think it was partly because they wanted to fit in so that they could maybe move forward. I think there was also an idea that like they were trying to prove themselves as Americans, but that for whatever reasons, they like didn't speak about it for years. But that's not like, now we talk about mental health so much more and about how you have to like talk about it to like process it and, with the trauma, to deal with your trauma. And that really didn't happen, for decades. And then slowly, I think the whole Japanese American community started to talk about it and started to kind of came out of that. And I think are in that moment of reclaiming like their story, their ability to speak out, all those kind of things. I think we're in that time currently. I don't know.
You're part of it. And that's why I applaud you. And I think you're exactly right. Like we are in this open just dialogue so much more, I think, as a direct consequence and result of all of this suppression and repression.
Yeah. And thanks to people who paid really high prices. I worry about like having these hard conversations and having people say things about, my grandparents. And, that was one of my fears, was having to have those conversations with people who would misunderstand my grandparents or something like that. But there are people who paid much, much higher prices at the beginning of this movement and so I think, it's something that sometimes you just have to face. But
I love it. Not that we have to, not the awfulness of facing it, but I just love that we are more acknowledging of all of it. I love that.
No, I think it's good.
That's the process.
Yeah, it's good. And it makes people uncomfortable sometimes, but it's not, that doesn't mean you shy away from it. It's still right to do it. So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh, I love it. Okay. I have a few more questions. I would still love to dive into. I love that we've talked about so many great, amazing things, and I want to still dive even more into the book, because we have to. So we'll be back very quickly after this short break. And we're back. Emily, I've gotten to know you for like less than an hour, but I just want to tell you I'm a huge fan, and
thanks.
And I've also gotten to know you through your book, so I'm a huge fan.
Thank you. Same, very same.
Oh, thank you. With the book, I think that there's a lot that really spoke to me, a lot that felt very historical. We've talked about like the importance of like personal narrative and personal experience, and then gone all the way to like talk about the political implications of what's happening right now in our society of like shutting down real conversations about this. I don't know. So Samantha, who was our protagonist, she's a photographer, and we're leading up to the incarceration camps. So I thought the funny thing is when I understood that this was like the subject matter of the book of what I would be diving into, I didn't know that all of that. I don't want to be spoiler. Dang, I don't know how to say this without spoiling. The timing of the way that you shared the story was really beautiful to me, because I think it was very humanizing. It's just, again, why I think books and film and everything, it's just a practice of empathy. You're diving into somebody else's world, and you get to walk in their shoes. You get to feel their feelings and have the crushes that oh my gosh, the crushes. I cannot get over like the romantic journey you took me on. It was just wonderful. And like, I actually squealed, like I audibly squealed at certain points. I was like, which we love. And that is such a great way, again, to create empathy and compassion through a very fun way. That's what I think good books and good film and good stories do. I guess my big question is like, what was the statement, or like, was there that part of intention when you're like, I'm going to put this out as a book and see what it can do out in the world?
Yeah.
I'm still having on spot. I'm curious like how that component like played a part. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, I think when I came back to it, remember I said I started and then came back to it later.
Yeah.
I think when I came back to it, I had things I wanted to speak to. It was a different, process in a certain way, because I wouldn't say an agenda. I would say I had questions. Like, I had questions that were really bothering me that I wanted to try to deal with. And I don't know even then that I had this idea that I would publish it. Like, I really think there was a part of me that was like, I don't know that I will ever let anyone read this. Like, this might just be for my, my file box or whatever. But I think that was more me dealing with my own issues, not anything that anyone else was saying. But yeah, there were things that I was dealing with. And then, things happened in the media and in the news, I guess, in real life. And then they got to the media. And I had feelings about them. And I was like, you know what? This is so much like what my grandparents went through. So one of those was these detentions at the border.
Yeah.
That was really, really, I think that was really triggering for all Japanese Americans. There were a bunch of groups that went down because there were some people who said, I can't go down. It's too close. Like, there were people who had been incarcerated, former incarcerees, who it was just so close to what had happened to them. And there was the Muslim ban and a bunch of these different things, and something about all those things happening in a short period of time. I was just like, no, we really do need to still talk about these things. And this was my way of doing that. This book was to talk about the things, the way we treat each other, the way we fail to see each other as fully human.
Yeah.
The way we forget that for every statistic, every person who this happens to, they have like all these hopes and dreams, these things that are just so similar to what happened. We had Phil too.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, that's why I wanted to put it out.
I thank you for doing that, because I think it's like a liberation movement, if you will. Like, my issues with different experiences in my life and with different people and maybe different ideas and ideologies, like, they deserve their space to be like honored, if you will, through like the uncomfortable feelings. Like, it's okay to not be okay about it, and like it's a thorn that we just try to keep working around. Like, we'll just maneuver around it. This is from The Untethered Soul by Michael Singer. But it's like talking about the ego and all this stuff. And it really hit a nerve with me, because it's like, we'll have these pains that are wounds. And then instead of addressing the wound, we'll just maneuver around it. Say you have something like sticking in you on your arm. Well, then you'll just not let your arm touch anything. You'll just do everything you can to like not disrupt that hurt. And you'll assimilate, and you'll start walking differently, and you'll start sitting differently, so that it just doesn't disrupt the wound. And at some point, like, it catches up. Because what if you want to put on a jacket? And like, what if you want to do anything? What if you want to go for a swim? You got to move your arm. It's gonna it comes up again because you didn't address the thing. It's still there. So in that way, like in Asian Heritage Month, like, I'm constantly reminded, and I've been immersed in the Asian American narrative, which I feel like you and I were talking before we recorded about the difference. Like, you lived in Utah, where it's very different landscape, different narratives. I've grown up at least the last 15 years, like kind of drowning in the Asian American narrative. And yet, as much as I get sometimes very tired of like harping over the same things, there's so much depth and nuance to it that I'm still constantly reminded, no, there's a lot more for us to still talk about. And even if I'm sick of talking about it, there's still so many other people that it's a brand new thing that they're discovering within themselves, that they're like unpacking. So again, why I come back to like thanking you. I'm big on like, and this sucks because it's been really sucky for me, but like accountability is awful, and it's so necessary. And it's also the way and a gateway to like being free of a lot of burdens, either keeping other people accountable, or like whether it's the government, or like groups of people, or like a parent, like, and self, right? Like having accountability. It's a very uncomfortable process to do that. It's so terrifying because you have to address this wound, and you have to acknowledge this thing hurt me. It hurts now. I'm not okay. I'm not fine. And that's really brave. It's just really brave because, again, like we were saying earlier before the break, like there's risk involved. You're risking a lot. The like sanity that you've cultivated by maneuvering around it, right? Like it's safer that way. It feels safer at least. And it feels more peaceful. It feels more tranquil. It feels whatever until it's not. And then you just like have to speak on it. So a long-winded way of saying, like, I truly appreciate the risk that you took to like put something very personal to you, and not just you, like you feel like that you're putting your family story and like inviting something that's not just about you. You're inviting scrutiny of people that you care about deeply. That's a big deal.
Yeah. Yeah. And while it is fiction, but like, that was like the fear is like having these people I love so dearly misunderstood.
Yeah.
You know, that's, you know, that's even worse than me being misunderstood, you know, like when it's your fault, you know, like that. Yeah. So
how do you, with the banning thing though, has it been a thing that you're potentially dealing with like your book or the topics that you've covered? Because you talk directly about racism and power and government, and like that's what's on the line right now. People don't know this is happening.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely like, if you look at the list of banned books, you know, it's all books that deal with race, that have, you know, sometimes they don't deal with race, but they're just on a book of books by diverse writers, or their main characters are brown or whatever. But and then sexuality and those kind of things. Those are all the books that are being banned. And there have been books about the internment. That's the old word for it. The incarceration is what people call it now.
Yeah.
There have been books about it banned already. My book hasn't been banned, knock on wood, but you know, but they are just anything about race right now is kind of in that category of things that could get put on one of those lists. So
is that hanging over your head right now, or is that, I mean, you're just going to kind of cross the bridge, or is it?
Yeah, I would say it hangs over my head in that, like all authors right now, it's like on our minds. It's something that like is sort of in the ether that we drink, and it's just, you know, it just bothers, you know, it feels wrong. As far as like my own book, I honestly have not spent a lot of time worrying about it, because there is just nothing I can do. You know, if it happens, it will happen. And I hope it doesn't, but if it does, then it does. And, you know, I don't want to give that kind of power to people, those kind of groups. So I just try not to worry about it.
Kudos to you. In turn, I'll worry about it, and or not worry about it. I'll be concerned and very loud about it, and maybe reactionary, but we'll see. I just like for you to know more about me. Like, I grew up in a really strict church culture, and I just want to say, like, my take on all of this, and I wonder what it'll be if and when I become a parent, right? But I'm an auntie now to many youngsters. The more you tell a kid they can't do something, the more you're really just driving them to do it. So I think the whole ban thing is really hilarious, because are you joking me? Like, is that you're literally baiting now, like all these, you're gonna make the teenagers be like, I'm not reading that. Like, oh, they don't want me to read it. I'm gonna go. That'll be the first thing they go by. So good luck on that. But it's also just this, like, it's driving me crazy the older I get, how much people across many different industries in different ways, like, just they're trying to control narratives, right? And like, when talking about books, especially something like you wrote, you're talking about a moment in history. It's a work of fiction, but it's in circumstances that really happened, and there are historical elements that people are trying to wipe out.
Yeah.
Like, just act like didn't happen.
Yeah. I think also, you know, I just, you know, here in Utah, I feel like the things that are getting banned most are things about gay characters or transgender characters. And I think and also there's some race element to it. But I think, you know, for kids who are who identify with those identifications, it is so it is such a painful thing to have people saying, these books are so bad that they need to be on this list of books that no one should ever be able to access. Like, if you're already living in Utah, where, it, again, like you said, like there's a religious culture here, and you're already dealing with that kind of prejudice, and then to have on top of that this conversation going on, it really is problematic, and kids need to be able to see themselves in books. And I think that's such an overly said thing now, but it's because we really need people to understand that. And so, it's really problematic. And it's saying effectively to other kids, you don't need to have that experience that gives you empathy for that kind of person. That
so true.
It's really
so true.
Really ugly. So yeah, that's how I feel anyway. And I know, obviously parents have to decide for their own children what to allow them to read. But I think it's a much more fraught conversation when you start up to apply it to a whole school district or to a whole school. Yeah. So
I think sometimes my separation from being a kid is so, every day it gets bigger, right? But like that, to put myself back in that state of like what I consumed or what signals I was receiving, right, from different points of authority about what, like how much that impacted my understanding and possibility that I allowed myself, and what I believed my role to be, and what I believed was good, and, how to be a very agreeable, obedient, quiet, which I'm not. And those are friction points, right? Because I was just like, what's so wrong with like me saying what I want to say? How come he can say it and I can't? And it was very specific to me in my growing years that I'm a girl, and that girls, I was literally told this by multiple adults in my life, like girls are not supposed to yell like that or like say things like that, which again, only for me, my personality spurred me on to like, okay, then I'm going to do it more.
Yeah.
Dick. No, anyway. I got very like, this was the rebel side of me that I didn't even like think was rebellious, but
that still causes a wound, right? It's still, and then there are kids too who, instead it just produces shame and turning inwards, and
which turns into behaviors, right? Like this is the public health. I studied public health of like really about how environment shapes behaviors and what are health outcomes as a result of those behaviors. Is it addiction? Is it whatever, young pregnancy when you're not ready, or like poverty, all these different things. There's so many factors that go into why we do the things that we do. I'm fascinated by humanity. So I'm very curious how this will go, because like the whole bookban thing that started, it was really just the loudest in Florida, but it's gone to Texas right now, or it's like spreading. And
it's everywhere.
It's everywhere.
And it's not everywhere, but it's throughout the United States now. And Florida definitely has the most like support from the state, government. But it's a movement, and it's a scary one, in my opinion. That we've seen so many times before. This is not new. This is not, we haven't seen this ever go well. And it's so interesting to me how people will like be like, this is like this, it's tied to democracy in some way or something. Yeah. When what we've seen it over and over be tied to, fascist, we've seen it over and over happen this way, like in China and Germany. Yeah. So I don't know. It's scary.
It is. It is. I'd say because the two of us have come from backgrounds where people preferred greatly for us to be quiet about a lot of things. To me, poetically speaking, in this story, in our narrative, it makes the most sense. Like, I've genuinely wondered over the years, like, why are you so threatened by what I have to say? That also, like, you are so hell-bent on stifling my voice, or like, you're so perturbed by what I have to say, my opinion, that like, I finally started to really see, like, there's a lot of power in what I have to say. And a lot of times the truth or at least a different version of like the truth than somebody would like to believe, can be a really big threat to different people in power. And I started to really question why. I had questions too, like why? Why is this such a big deal? Why are you putting so much effort, so much emotional rage, and like, you know, you're so determined to snuff certain narratives? That to me now at this point speaks volumes of like the power of those narratives. Why? And there's a lot to unpack there, and we've already like kind of, I know that you have to go to your next thing, which I'm so sad, but like I'm just glad that hopefully we're continuing to continue conversations or ignite conversations, especially in people that have had fear and that have had hesitation, because there's strength in numbers and there are support systems. And I do think every conversation counts, whether that's a personal one, it doesn't have to be public anywhere, or if it's so much for like, there's so much power in someone who's usually quiet, again, like amongst all the writers, different creatives, when the quiet person finally speaks up, there's some big back there. Because it took a lot for them to like finally say something. So I hope that my loudmouthedness kind of helps bring people like you into my universe, and like can share this in some kind of a platform to share our truths. Yeah. And make sure that they're not snuffed out.
I think you're really, really good at that in many things that you do. Like you're not just in the podcast, but in a lot of ways, you're someone who amplifies voices. So
thank you. I appreciate that. It's finally, we'll get into that another day because we'll hang out for sure, Emily. It's because I had people really trying really, really hard to snuff me out. And I'll never forget that. And
glad you didn't let him.
Yeah, I'm glad too. And I need reminded, like, it can be a privilege. It's a privilege, and it's all the things. It's responsibility, it's an opportunity, it's a blessing, it's a curse. It's a lot of things. But we're here, and I'm just so excited. I hope that everybody will go. I'm gonna show everyone. Can I show everyone the cover?
Oh, sure.
Okay. Yeah. Well, because I have it's the not for sale, it's the uncorrected proof, but
that's okay.
Beneath the White Silk Sky. I should have opened with this, but I didn't want to everyone please go read this book. And I hope it's the first of, are you working on another piece?
I am. Yeah.
It's just the beginning. It's so beautiful. I won't spoil it, but there are things that I just like trust. I was so happy. And in addition, it's not, because I don't want anybody to think I was just ready for my heart to be wrecked. And there's hard things that you talk about. That's the scope of humanity. So I just don't want anybody to be swayed that like it's about incarceration. It's not about incarceration. It's about humanity. It's about a beautiful young woman who's trying to figure her life out and stand up for herself and deal with really hard things. That's what it's about. And so that journey was beautiful. It was moving. It elicited squeals. I got really angry at times. I got really, a lot of things. And that's what I think a good story does. So I just want to say that about your book.
Thank you. Thank you so much. You're too nice. But thank you.
No, I respect the process. And before we wrap up, 3 quick questions I ask all my guests before we go. What are you grateful for today, Emily?
My kids. That's a boring answer, but true.
How many do you have?
I have 4.
Working woman. I love it. Working mama. What are you looking forward to?
This is so surfing. We're getting to summer, and I'm excited to.
That's amazing.
Water.
I'm very scared of surfing, so good for you. I hope you have fun. And what are the last words that you want to leave all of our listeners say? And everyone's watching on YouTube because we're on video now, which is crazy.
Let's see. I should have thought about this since you do this. I should have thought about this. Last words. Well, just going in with what we talked about, I think that everyone has stories to tell, and that all those stories are important and valid, and that the more stories that are out there from lots of different perspectives, the better our common library will be at reflecting what humanity really is. So, yeah.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Thank you so
for
much
for having me. Yeah. And really appreciate it.
My honor. No, we're great American author. And, it's just this is an honor for me. So thank you for joining, and I'll definitely talk to you soon. If you're ever in LA, we're hanging out.
That would be great. I would love that. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Emily.